Hey everyone, Reverend Holly here. Hope you guys are doing well on this Monday. As hopefully you all are aware of, we had a congregational meeting yesterday, our annual meeting, where we celebrated our successes of 2021, as well as passed our 2022 budget finally. And then at the end, our church trustee, Steve Sanderford, gave a presentation about our building. I know many of you have been asking questions since our boiler went out in December, whether or not we're going to replace it or when we're going to replace it and all of that. And so um, we, Steve gave a presentation about uh, basically some bigger, more pressing things around our building. We wanted to inform everyone in the congregation, both members and visitors, about really what's happening with the building. It's not that we can't or won't replace the boiler, but we want everyone to understand that there are a lot of other major issues just behind the boiler. The boiler's just the tip of the iceberg. So, anyway, Steve Sandiford presented this presentation yesterday. It didn't actually record appropriately as I was hoping on Zoom, so I've kind of re-recorded it and led us through the best that I can. Um, and that gives you a big picture of all the variables that go into looking at our building, like what needs to be fixed and some concerns, as well as the current makeup of our congregation and our budget, as well as some options for the future. So we hope that you will pay attention to this presentation and watch it, maybe rewatch it. And then at the end, because we're giving you a big picture understanding, we then want to come together as a congregation in small groups that we're calling listening sessions to hear your voice and to get your opinion. Um, what is good and valuable about the building and what's not? What is our mission, or what should our mission be? And where is God calling us in our 21st century context? What does it mean to be a church in this day and age? What does it mean to be 7th Street Christian Church? So I hope you guys will, again, pay attention and watch this video. And then at the end, sign up for a listening session. Thanks so much. Hey everyone, Reverend Holly here. As I shared in my introduction, this is a building discussion presentation that the trustees put together. Our church trustees are Cheryl Loggy, Pat Mays, and Steve Sanderford. And the trustees help oversee more of the business day-to-day items. So they take care of like insurance claims and a lot of the legal stuff, contracts, say with Greenspring, for example. And then there is a number of um, different trusts that they oversee, monetary trusts that help support the life of the congregation. But they put together this presentation for our annual meeting that was held yesterday, March 13th of 2022. And for those of you who were unable to be there, we're sharing this presentation with you today. As I had shared in my intro, we did record it on Zoom, but it didn't quite record correctly with Steve presenting, so you have yours truly. So I'm going to do my best to recap just like Steve did in our meeting yesterday, as well as maybe share some additional information about questions that were raised at that meeting. So we do ask those of you who are unable to be there to please watch this video in its entirety before signing up for a listening session. We don't have time in those listening sessions to kind of recap aspects of this presentation. So we want to make the most of our listening session time. So with that said, let's get started. So we are calling this our building situation. As we shared, the boiler went out in December. Did not think that would be what kind of was the main catalyst for all of this. I was hoping that we could be ahead of it. And about 3 years ago, right before the pandemic, I raised the concern about our air conditioning unit in the sanctuary, and concern that we could no longer kind of put Band-Aids on it, and that when it breaks, it really was going to be financially catastrophic for us, and that we needed to really be considering what we would do. In the meantime, the boiler went out. Well, meantime also being a pandemic, but it kind of put that conversation on hold, or we were kind of tripping along in that conversation over the last couple of years. So here we are. A lot of you have wondered, are we going to replace the boiler? We certainly can. It will cost about $80,000. One thing that leadership wanted everyone to understand is that behind the boiler are a number of other building concerns. So as I said, overdue on a failed air conditioning system. That is the air conditioning system just for the sanctuary. And a potential cost, these are rough estimates, but we did have a master plan done a handful of years ago that gave us a bit of a better financial picture of what these things cost. So we have on the low end about $250,000 to replace that system, upwards of $400,000 to $500,000. We can go into the details of why that is, but on the short end, it's that the building was really built around the air conditioning system, so we have to kind of dismantle the building in order to put in a new one. So the second concern is our elevator is currently inoperable. We did put a chairlift in as a stop gap in between, but if we can't replace it, that's the short end. We can't really keep fixing it. That hasn't really worked out, and its current location won't really meet code because the shaft is just too small. They don't make elevators that size anymore, not within the codes of our building anyway. So we'd have to have a new corridor and shaft and everything built, and that we're looking at is a very expensive, about $850,000 price tag on that. The next thing are mini splits. So if you've been around the building, maybe you've been in my office or other classrooms or the library, you notice these independent air conditioning units in each room. And those are called mini splits. They were put in the 90s and in a larger renovation that happened. And they've been amazing, very efficient and wonderful, but they are over 30 years old and they are starting to deteriorate and to break. So for example, we have 4 in Hanover Hall, not including the one in the kitchen. So really 5 in Hanover Hall, and really 3 of those are already broken. The one in West Basement's also broken. Anyway, so those cost. There are 23 mini splits in the entire church building, and each of those cost between $7,000 and $10,000, just depending on their size. So, for example, the ones in Hanover Hall are larger. They can actually heat instead of just cool. So the one, for example, in my office only can do air conditioning, but the ones in Hanover Hall can also do heat. So again, 2 of those are out, and so those are a bit more expensive. So we're looking at approximately another $250,000 to replace mini splits. A few years ago, we did go through what we call a flood remediation. More on that later, but we did address a lot of the flooding problems, and much of that has been mitigated. Hallelujah. Hanover Hall used to flood all the time. It has been relatively stable, minimal water. Never promised that water wouldn't come back into the building, just that it would be minimal. Any water that is getting in Hanover Hall really has to do with the city not keeping up with the changes in the demand within Richmond City. West Basement, because again, that HVAC unit, that mini split has gone out, and there still is a bit more flooding, and it's just humid down there. There's no temperature control. It still has mold issues. So outside work that really needs to be done. There's some concrete repair work, particularly around the front entrance area. There's some areas that it's sloping and water is seeping into the building, as well as some issues actually over on West Basement side. Our sprinkler system needs to be looked at. Our spotlights that shine on our building currently aren't working and are really it's an out-of-date system. Our parking lot needs to be resurfaced. The brick in some areas of our building needs to be repointed, so the mortar is deteriorating. These are just common wear and tear things that happen to any kind of building, but what happens is that water is seeping in, into the building. So we are currently have noticed this in the sanctuary, as well as Reverend George Cunningham's office, or also known as like the history room. So those are two particular areas that we've noticed need to be addressing. There are some issues with some roof repair on the flat parts. And of course, we have this white building. If you're not aware, there's a little brick white building behind in the back of the lot. It actually used to be the original offices of 7th Street Christian Church before the rest of the education wing was built. And that's just kind of sitting there. Their windows are broken, and the roof is deteriorated. And so that also needs some work. Inside, there are some doors that need to be replaced, particularly doors that are facing on the outside. Perfect example is the outside door leading down directly into Hanover Hall. So to the right of our main entrance, the main entrance on Grove. So that doors needs to be replaced. Those big, thick wood doors have a cost of between $5,000 and $7,000, so they're not inexpensive. Again, we've already mentioned some west basement issues still. Lighting and maintenance, particularly including the sanctuary, we have some lights that are out and need to be fixed, as well as some electrical, plumbing upgrades. We just are on an old, antiquated system. Our kitchen vent in the kitchen, we did the nice renovation, and it's wonderful. It does not meet code, so it's fine for us. But if we wanted to rent out the kitchen in any capacity, we can't do that because the vent's not up to code. There's also, I guess, a few dishwasher issues. So there's some additional concerns. So there's the building. The next thing that we want to look at is the reality of our budget. We have approximately 50 active units and families within 7th Street Christian Church, and we are growing, and I want to celebrate that and name that. I also want to name that giving has changed drastically over the last 30 years. I'll use myself as an example, as I'm going to be 45 next month. A millennial, I guess, technically, or am I Gen X? I don't know. But, I lack a lot of capacity because in my entire lifetime, wages have been stagnant. I was told education debt was good debt and to take it out and not worry about it. But now I've got all these student loans. And so while my generation is incredibly generous, the capacity to give is not what it once was for previous generations. And the reality is it likely it never will be. So our pledges, even while we're growing, our pledges have continued to decline year after year. And just so y'all know, our budget is around $250,000. A little bit more than that, I guess, maybe 260. And we, our giving only makes up $100,000 of that. So we are not, our stewardship to our church does not make up our entire budget, and we'll share more about that later. So on top of that, our key supporters are getting older. We hope that there's people will be with us for indefinitely. But the reality is that we have a handful of generous older members that when they pass, we will lose a large portion, nearly half of not just our budget, but our stewardship budget. So of $100,000, we will likely lose $35,000 to $45,000 in the next 2 to 3 years. Maybe it's a little longer, maybe it's 5 years, but know that we're about to lose a significant portion of our budget. So, some other realities of our budget. A lot of times people ask, well, have we cut cost? Before I came, there was an intentional interim, Chuck Rowland, that did a lot of work with the congregation on transformation and transition. And the church really worked hard to reduce where they could. And so went through some really terrible, hard decisions to cut positions and to cut other costs and really tighten up the budget. And I mean that was really tough, and kudos that they moved through that process. But as it still sits, 38% of our current budget is spent on the building, just paying the bills, paying the water, paying the utilities, pest control, anything related. We've got a minimal maintenance budget of about $20,000 annually, and that's it. So we spend about $120,000 annually on our building for 50 people. So that's a lot of money, and that doesn't even count actually working on maintaining our building, right? Or doing investing in our building to take care of the day-to-day items. So like the HVAC system. So most recently, what we are seeing, and really what long-range planning named last year, is that our mission has become our building instead of our mission becoming like being outreach or being the community and where Christ is calling us. So something to consider. Some other realities of our budget. We do have some income that we get from a couple of tenants. Green Spring International Music School is probably the best known, as you see harps and stuff all throughout the building and other wonderful instruments. We never entered into that relationship thinking that it was going to save the day in the sense of our budget. They pay a nominal $12,000 a year in rent, so $1,000 a month. But that's never going to be enough. I mean, it's helpful in many ways, but it's at the end of the day, it's not a way to really perpetuate and keep the building going. In addition, when we have tenants or a relationship like we do with Green Spring, we're unable currently with our building situation to do our best to help and support them. So case in point, as the boiler went out, they've had to find other places to meet. So where does that leave us? As Steve Sandiford shared, our building situation is about a $1.5 million problem that needs to be addressed. So additional information about our budget and other sources of support, places that have been a source of support in the past. You may or may not be aware of 7th Street Christian Church Foundation. It is a separate entity outside of our church. And if you aren't familiar with it, but would like to learn more, please reach out to me and we'll share that information. But the foundation has always supported our budget with approximately $75,000 annually. In the last couple of years, they have given more, and that extra has been used into what we call a grace fund. And so if people are in need, we have a pool of money that we can help support people with. But in the past too, the foundation has always kind of been the go-to to help 7th Street Christian Church with any big building concerns. And I'll share more about a recent example in the next couple slides. But essentially, the foundation would like to move away from supporting the building to supporting outreach projects. So where established members might think, oh, this $1.5 million problem, let's just go to the foundation to help us. There really is limited to no opportunity for support from the foundation for any major church renovation. So that is important for us to know. A couple years ago, but actually 3 years ago, right before the pandemic, we did a little bit of a capital campaign to renovate Hanover Hall. We had a lot of flooding and concerns that I had shared earlier. And we got that project done, but we only got that project done because we had significant support from the foundation, as well as our church trustees. And I can share more about that in a minute. But what we learned from that small capital campaign, which we raised about $110,000, but really when it's all said and done, our portion just at 7th Street Christian Church was about $55,000, and of that $55,000, that included some support from the trustees from a building fund, and one very large donation, and really only about $20,000 was raised from the actual congregation, and then that was matched with the foundation. So that's how we got to the $110,000 for that building renovation. But what it tells us is that we don't have the capacity within our 50 family units to really undergo a large capital campaign of like $1.5 million. So something to be mindful of and aware. Now, some of you might be asking, well, don't the church trustees oversee a lot of different funds? And yes, they do. And those funds are all mostly earmarked for other things. So, for example, and it's actually in the next slide, the Darden Fund is earmarked just for music. There's a Cawthorn Fund, bigger story, but the short version is that there's a large pool of money, about $250,000 in what's called the Cawthorn Fund, to be used for ADA or elder support items. So most certainly, if we were to renovate the building, for example, like the elevator and so forth, or update bathrooms for ADA accessibility in a renovation, that money could certainly be used. But that's only a small amount of money compared to a larger $1.5 million renovation. So all of those other funds that our trustees oversee all have ties to it, even to the point that they can only draw a certain amount every year, and it can only be used in certain ways, and we're just legally obligated. So we can't touch the principal, or we can't use it in another capacity that we would like. Another option is that we could obtain a loan. We can use the building as collateral, and we could obtain a loan for the renovations. I think the concern there is acknowledging that we can't currently meet our budget. We're currently have concerns about meeting our budget. And so do we need to take on any additional debt? So that's something that needs to be considered. So what are our options? These are the options maybe before us. Maybe you have other amazing ideas that you will be willing to share. But we can go ahead and renovate as is. We can do our best to raise new funds and try to address all the major issues within our building. And there's, as you can see, pros and cons about that. We own the building. That's important to know. We're at an incredible location. We have generational memory, but some of the concerns are that we have limited capacity to raise such money for a large renovation. So there is the option to sell the building and move. We can seek a smaller building, one that's more manageable, or we can even lease something in the meantime as we discern what's next. It says there an example of the Park Avenue property in discussion. A small group of us went to look at a smaller chapel situated within our neighborhood, somewhat in our neighborhood, just to consider what's out there. I think a concern or just one of the big questions is while this building was smaller, it was older than our current building and really kind of had the same issues. I was reminded of all the flood remediation that happened because anyway, it was a mess. So, but to to immediately sell and move means that maybe we wouldn't be so tied to this building, and can look beyond something else into some other missional opportunities and energy that's not about the building. The other option is some kind of opportunity of maybe selling a portion of the building or of our property, maybe the parking lot, or letting go of a portion of the building and like raising it. And so what that means is that we could team up with a developer, the right kind of developer, and maybe, like I said, like sell and they develop and then use that money from the sale to reinvest in our own building. Or maybe it's something a little bit more nuanced and creative, such as partnering with the right developer and putting in some sort of senior housing or something missional. So there's options there. That the plus on that is that we would get to maintain, like keep our part of the building, likely like the sanctuary in Hanover Hall. And we get to stay at our location. The minus is that that's a very potentially a time consuming way to navigate this issue. So it's I wonder if we have the time, but I wouldn't want that to limit us. So those are the current options that your key leaders in the church have discerned. Steve put this together with just some comparisons for the direction. We don't have all the numbers. We are working on getting more information. We can sell the building and buy new, and maybe that gets us ahead. My recommendation as the pastor, not about ideas, but whatever the way forward is I would love to see us not be dependent on the foundation anymore when it comes to our building and our budget. So that might put us there. We could choose to renovate the building, and that's sort of in the red, where we would owe a lot of money and put us in some debt. And then of course we've got the partial building sale and renovation, and that's where we don't know. We actually might be ahead if in that proposal. We may not. We don't know. But that's an idea of some of those options. So our next steps. Hopefully you've made it this far in this presentation, and now we want to listen to you guys. I kind of skipped over the slide, but the trustees are like, this is for the congregation to really help discern and help us figure out what is it that we might want to do. Where is God calling us? What do we love about our building, but what can we do better? And so that is what we want. And that's our next steps, is so that we have a number of listening sessions that we have scheduled. And we hope that you will sign up for one so that we can hear your thoughts, your concerns, where you have sensed God calling 7th Street Christian Church in this context. So thanks, everyone. Hey everyone, thanks for making it through that presentation. I hope that it was really helpful. And now what I hope is that you guys will choose to sign up for a listening session. We need your input, your buy-in, your prophetic imagination to help us discern what's next and where we're called and what we're to do. And so we ask you to sign up for a listening session. We don't care if you're officially a member of this church, if you've come once or you've come 1,000 times, if you are young or old or a child or it doesn't matter. We want you to sign up and attend one of these listening sessions. We also want you to know that these sessions are going to be really structured. They are going to be 90 minutes in length. And we have a very specific set of questions with a certain amount of time allotted for each question. So we invite you, as you attend, to have your answers be focused. Just know that your responses need to be focused. And that's also why each listening session will only have a total of 8 participants. So that includes couples or families. As you sign up, each person should have a slot. We also want you to know that we currently have 5 potential dates. 4 of them are in person because we think that if as much as possible, these listening sessions should be in person, but we also understand everyone's working or can't make it. And so there's also one on Zoom. But if these dates that are proposed don't work for your schedule, I want you to email me. We will certainly add more dates. And I also want y'all to know that this is the first of many conversations. That doesn't mean don't come, please do, but know that after this is said and done, we plan on collecting all this data and then sharing it widely with the congregation and additionally having more conversations about this important topic. So we also ask before you come that you make sure that you have watched that trustee presentation, and please do so before attending the listening session because we won't have time to go back and update anything about the presentation. And then finally, you have to be on time for these listening sessions. We really want to respect everyone's time, and we don't want the meetings to be disrupted. So once they start, if you come late, we're going to kindly ask that you sign up for another time. So, but we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks, friends.